have an awesome guest today, my great friend, Jimmy Carson. Jimmy is a former professional hockey player who played 13 seasons in the NHL. He was the second pick in the NHL draft in 1986, was named to the All-Rookie team in 1987, and played in the All-Star game in 1989. In his second season in the NHL, he became only the second teenager in NHL history to score 50 goals in a season. The first was Wayne Gretzky. He scored more goals as a teenager than any other player in NHL history, 92 goals. In the hockey world, he's best known as the player who was traded from the Los Angeles Kings to the Edmonton Oilers for Wayne Gretzky, in what was one of the biggest trades in the history of professional sports. Jimmy has not only had a great career in the NHL, but not surprisingly, he's had a great career after hockey. He's a great guy and a great friend. Jimmy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Randy, for having me on. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
I like to start my podcast telling my listeners and viewers about my relationship with my guests. It's a little hard to believe, but we've known each other now for 21 years. It started one night when I got a phone call from my great friend, Gail Stallsmith, who said there was a friend of a friend who wanted to meet me. And I want to provide a little context to this. At the time, Akamai had gone public and our company was worth more than $30 billion, and I had done well financially. There were a couple of profile stories about me in Detroit and elsewhere, and a lot of stories about the company. And I had a lot of people calling me and emailing me asking for things and to get together. This was a friend of a friend, so I figured this was for sure another one of those. And when I asked Gail who it was, she said, some guy named Jimmy Carson. I said, the hockey player Jimmy Carson? She wasn't a sports fan, and she replied, I think he used to play hockey. I've been a huge hockey fan and a Detroit Red Wings fan all of my life. So I said, yes, I want to meet him. And that's the beginning of our relationship.
Well, you're refreshing my memory a bit. That's very accurate. I remember having a colleague in the Detroit area who was living next door to, and I never met, is it Gail? I never met Gail, but, and somehow was talking about, I was asked one day by my colleague, have you ever heard of Randall Kaplan? And I said, no, that name doesn't ring a bell. And then he started telling me that kind of the big story, you're from Detroit area and you moved out and you founded some big technology company and you're out in LA. And I had been going to LA quite a bit back then. And my wife was from LA. And somehow I said, wow, he would be a great guy to meet. And I at some point, I don't know if it was the first conversation or the second, I said, you know, I go out to LA a lot. I'd love to meet the guy and just network and see what, you know, I always admire people who've done great things and taken risks and et cetera, and hardworking people. And he's like, yeah, I'll talk to my neighbor. And the next thing I know, the wheels were in motion, and somehow we got connected as far as, you know, I called you or I emailed you or something. And then I came out to LA and we kind of had our initial conversation / meeting. And we've been friends ever since.
I'm glad Gail gave me a call. And Gail, if you're listening right now, thank you. I want to start off by talking about your childhood, your family life, and your journey to becoming an NHL All-Star. Let's start from the beginning. People hear the name or read the name Jimmy Carson, they would not associate your name with your Greek heritage. Tell us about your grandfather and when he came to the U.S. and why.
So my grandfather, so my real Greek name was changed in the 20s was Kyriazopoulos, which is a nice big long Greek name. My grandfather and grandmother were both born in Greece, and my grandfather was a chef on a cruise ship in the sometime in the 1920s, and the cruise ship ended up in New Orleans, and he jumped ship literally, and he got to Detroit because he had a distant relative in Detroit. And then he was a very hard worker. And like most Greek immigrants at the time and a little bit now, he became eventually a restaurant owner. And he owned a restaurant right across from, for you hockey fans, the Olympia Stadium, which was one of the original 6 stadiums and was kind of the heart of Detroit. For you Detroiters, it was Grand River and McGraw. And I actually have pictures of the Olympia being built, taken from my grandpa's restaurant. So years continued, the Red Wings became a big deal in Detroit. And many years later, Gordie Howe and Ted Lindsay, all-time NHL greats, would tell me that, oh yeah, we would all go eat at your grandpa's restaurant. And they'd say, we remember your dad and uncle as like little tykes running around. And one of the things I'll never forget, Gordie Howe specifically told me was two things. He said that, I don't know if it was featured in Sports Illustrated or not, but when he was talking about his first game, his first NHL goal and the build up and what was like the pregame routine. And he mentions that he ate at my grandpa's restaurant, which I thought was pretty cool. And then the other thing that both he and Ted Lindsay told me, who I got to know over the years, especially when I joined the Red Wings, was that Jack Adams, who was the big general manager, president of the team, and everyone feared him, he would like impose punishment to the players if they weren't performing well or whatever, and he was just in a bad mood. So you can't go across the street over to Carson's restaurant. And I remember Gordie Howe telling me, oh yeah, Jack Adams would punish us by not letting us go to your grandpa's restaurant. So my grandpa, who I never really got to, I mean, he passed away in 1975, but he had been ill. He had a stroke. So I didn't really have a relationship with him, but I'd heard so many stories over the year that he became friends with a lot of these, not friends going out and stuff, but friends like seeing him in his place all the time. So that was kind of my initial historical connection. And then my grandma and grandpa having established themselves in the Detroit area. And back then, Detroit was booming. Like that was the Model T days and Henry Ford doing the assembly line, et cetera. I mean, you're from Detroit, so you know a little bit of Detroit history, I presume. Detroit was rocking back then. And he eventually sold that restaurant. He got another restaurant, a bigger restaurant, kind of by the GM headquarters. And then, from then always had tickets at Olympia and the Red Wings and kept that connection. So that's kind of the initial Greek component, and as well as kind of my very first entree to any type of anything hockey related.
I hope you're enjoying this video so far, but before we jump back in, I want to know if you've ever thought about what you need to do to reach the next level of success in your life. Over the last 25 years, I've been an advisor to more than 50 companies. I've invested nearly 100, including Google, Lyft, and Seagate, and I also co-founded a company that today is worth more than $15 billion. I've been incredibly blessed in my journey, and at this stage in my life, I want to give back. I want to share the lessons I've learned so you can reach incredible success way faster than I did. In my own journey, I've learned that having the right mentor is a massive advantage to achieving our goals. I'm hugely passionate about mentoring others, and I'm looking for a few hungry entrepreneurs who are excited to take action on their journey to incredible future success. So if that's you, I've got an opportunity. In the description of this video, there's a link where you can apply to work with me. All you need to do is answer a few simple questions, and if you're a good fit, my team will reach out so we can build a game plan together. All right, now let's get back to the video. I remember you took me one day, I met you down in San Pedro, and we went to an authentic Greek restaurant. I love Greek food. Do you remember that?
Papadakis Taverna. Oh, yeah.
And what was super cool about that is there's a Greek tradition, apparently, where you take a plate and you throw it at a wall. And you're telling me, go do it. And it's a hard thing to do, to actually take a plate, it's going to break, and throw it at a wall. It was super fun.
Yeah.
What's that tradition about?
Well, I think that was more the tradition of that restaurant. But I mean, historically, in a lot of the Greek villages and islands, and we still have a family home. So so what I didn't tell you was my mom. So other side of the family, the grandparents I just mentioned were on my dad's side. My mom was actually born and raised in Greece and came over like at 22. And she came from the island of Rhodes. So I don't know if you spent any time on any of the Greek islands, but the island of Rhodes is in the South Aegean. It's historical in the sense of one of the ancient seven wonders of the world. The Colossus of Rhodes was there, and it's a very historical place. And interesting story here. So my grandma on that side, they lived on a little tiny island in the Aegean as well. Well, during World War II, the Germans came in, and literally the stories I heard were just heart-wrenching. They just dispersed from the island. She was a widow with 7 kids, my mom being the youngest, and they they dispersed and they ended up going to all these little different islands literally to try to survive. And they weren't alone. Everyone was doing the same thing. So they ended up in Rhodes, which is the biggest of the islands. And back then, they bought a lot. I mean, when I say right on the water, I mean right on the water. And back then, the poor people or the disadvantaged were buying and living on the water. The wealthier people were living inland with a bigger lot and a fence and a lawn and a yard, etc. And because they didn't want the migrant fishermen and the drunks in the middle of the night, and so that's where my mom grew up, was literally right on the water in the Aegean Sea, overlooking the mountains of Turkey. Well, as the decades started to progress, living on the water and having waterfront property suddenly became a nice thing to have. So they've kept this property, and then about 20 years ago, they knocked down this old dilapidated house and put up a 3-story building. The first floor is like a restaurant and a shop, and then my aunt's family has kind of the middle, and we have the top. So like we have an amazing view. They call them houses. I'm going to call them apartment. Right on the water in one of the Greek islands. So we've gone quite a bit, and we try to go because it's a great thing culturally, and I love going there. I speak Greek. I was raised, with a lot of heritage, etc. So we try to keep that, that going.
I'm waiting for the invite. I love Greece. One of my favorite places. My wife and I, the make or break it trip was to Greece. So we can talk about that later.
So actually, I didn't even answer your question. So you talk about the plate. So historically, you'd go to a club or whatever. It wasn't so there was some plate throwing, but a lot of times you'd have a shot of ouzo or something, and then you'd break the glass. But that's not as common, but this restaurant, they played on that kind of inter-village party thing. And you're right. You would go throw a plate or throw a cup or whatever. And then if you remember, they turn all the music on and people were dancing, flipping off wall. I mean, it was just a very exuberant, fun evening.
I'm a numbers guy, and I like thinking about profit margins and things like that. And I remember thinking, how much do these plates cost? I mean, you could add another $5 to $8 per person per meal.
Yeah, there you go.
Let's go back to your family. What were your parents like?
So, talked about my mom. So my mom came over, and she was a tremendous, she's still living. She's a tremendous mom, and she didn't work. She basically was, the stay-at-home mom. I have one sister, 14 months younger than me, and she kind of did all the motherly, wifely duties. My dad grew up in the Detroit area. He went to University of Michigan, and then he ended up, he was a lawyer, and he did a lot of, state law, some immigration, et cetera. And he passed away 3 years ago, but I had amazing parents for supporting me. But, my dad never missed one practice or one game, like not one. Like everyone knew, like he never missed. And no matter where it was, he was my biggest fan. And sometimes he was the one who gave me the truth serum when I thought I played well or whatever. And he would be like, not that over intimidating dad, but just he wouldn't sugarcoat it and just say, hey, if you want to get to the next level, you need to do this better or whatever. But listen to your coach. He'd always say that, listen to your coach, but your work ethic wasn't where it should have been today or whatever the situation was. So I had amazing parents, very blessed, very thankful, and huge, huge support. So I've actually tried to emulate their parenting skills with my 4 kids in trying to give the truth serum, but being very supportive.
You had a little bit of an unusual background because you grew up in a privileged environment. Your dad did well financially. That was very different than probably 99.99% of the people that you played with throughout the years.
No question about it. I grew up in Grosse Pointe. I went to a prep school called University of Liggett. And I was going to be that kid that was going to go to college and be an investment banker or be a lawyer. Being a pro athlete was the farthest thing from, I'm sure, my dad's mind in my mind. But suddenly I started playing in some of these amateur hockey leagues, and then CompuWare. So I don't know if you know much about the CompuWare program, but they really revolutionized hockey, in my opinion, in the United States, and especially in Detroit. So the owner, Peter Karmanos, who owned the Hartford Whalers, which became the Carolina Hurricanes, and is an NHL Hall of Famer and American Hockey Hall of Fame, etc. He's Greek. Him and my dad knew each other, and they were very good friends. My dad did a lot of legal work for him, etc. But they were friends first and foremost, and had some family connections. And much like you were referencing Akamai and kind of a big deal, well, he went public in the Detroit area in 1992, and that was a big deal in Detroit. Everyone knew CompuWare. Well, he not only was very driven for success on the computer software side, we would go to these tournaments, and he's just like, you know what? And I won't use the exact words he used, because he was a very intense, still is. I still see him occasionally. Very intense person. He's like, we go to these Canadian tournaments, and like, we're just as good. There's no reason why we can't have a factory of American hockey players out of the Detroit area playing in the NHL on a regular basis. And people laughed at him. They said, oh, come on, that's impossible. And he said, well, I'm going to show you. So he created CompuWare Hockey Club. And I was on like one of the first teams ever. And we were traveling both countries, the United States and Canada. And we started really picking it up and winning tournaments and making a name for ourselves and, the program and individual players. And so that was an interesting kind of start. Was once you'd start getting some exposure, but back to the original question, I'm at this prep school. I'm going to go to school and do whatever, investment banking or law. But now you're getting this exposure, and you have scouts coming at you at 14 years old from the Western Hockey League and the Ontario Hockey League and the Quebec Hockey League. And they're like, you've got some real talent. We want to draft you. And I'm like, what are we talking about here? So just to fast forward, back then, as an American.
Well, before we do that, Jimmy, can we go back? I'd love to talk about when you started playing hockey. When was the first time you put skates on? And then definitely want to move to the progression, CompuWare, how you did in the leagues. But if you could just take a quick moment back.
So back to the privileged background aspect. So this school, University Liggett, had their own hockey rink. How many schools had their own hockey rink? Well, this school did. And we had as one of our gym classes was skating. So if you remember earlier in the conversation, I was telling you how my grandpa owned this restaurant across the street from Olympia. Well, he also owned a lot that was a car wash, but subsequently became a parking lot. So now I'm a young kid. My dad is a lawyer, but my grandpa got ill. He had a stroke. So my dad was kind of in charge of this parking lot. So he would go down for every Olympia event, and it was about 15 minutes from our house. Well, he would bring me along. So here's I'm this little tyke, 5, 6 years old, going to Olympia Stadium, and the Canadians were in town. Or it was I remember one time it was a Kiss concert. I mean, everyone, the Beatles played there, Elvis played there. You had the NHL, you had Harlem Globetrotters, you had whatever you could imagine. So this parking lot was literally across the street. So it was always full. So my dad would take me, he would drop me off at the door. I knew the usher, I knew the popcorn guy. I had charge accounts with all these guys, the popcorn guy, the ice cream guy, the Coke guy, whatever. And we had like these season seats that I'd go to. I actually knew, which I'm sure will dovetail to a story later on, is the Red Wing players, their wives sat in a certain section. Well, I got to know all of them. I would sit on Marcel Dion's wife's lap. And then my dad would come in after about a period or two. I'm 5, by the way, 5 or 6 years old. So, and then a year or a period or two, and then he'd come grab me. He'd settle my debts, $2 to the ice cream guy and $1 to the popcorn guy, and then he'd take me home. So of course, I have this real love of hockey just because I'm going to the Red Wing game. So now I go to the school where we're going to learn how to skate in gym class. So that's where I first got my spark is, okay, I'm going to these Red Wing games. I love watching it. So now I'm going to go try skating. And I was pretty good in skating. And then the next step was, okay, I'm going to go play on a team, house team. So that's kind of how it all started.
One of my first memories as a kid, my dad used to take me to games at Olympia and then Cobo Hall after that. And I grew up a lifelong fan as well, going to a few games per year. But Olympia was amazing. Old school building, brick building, square rectangle shape. It was just awesome.
So it was originally that and Chicago Stadium and Madison Square Gardens were all built for boxing. So they went straight up like this. So if you were in the top level, the mezzanine or the upper deck, when you look down, I mean, you were looking straight down at the ice. Where like Joe Louis in Detroit and some of the stadiums after that, they went way back like that so they could get more fans in. Now that the newer stadiums have gone kind of a little bit more straight up, but yeah, it was amazing. Like if you go to that upper deck, you were like staring straight down at the rink.
So you're 6 years old when you started playing, and you're playing at Liggett. By the way, as you know, I went to Country Day. We had a very good hockey team. We recruited. We played you in a bunch of sports. We split a lot of the sports. And I don't remember how we did on the hockey front, but the team played at Cranbrook, which is another local private school. I think Liggett, Cranbrook, Country Day were the three best. But hockey was a very big part of our high school days, going to all the games.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was a big rivalry. Those three schools were, in the prep school league, that they were the big competitors. They still are to a certain extent. But I never actually played for the school team. So they wanted me to later years when I got into, in the high school years. But so yeah, 6 years old, I start playing, house was kind of the first few, and I was really excelling, and I started playing up. And then I transitioned, but now this is where the CompuWare story comes in. A couple of years later, Peter Karmanos is starting his CompuWare hockey program, and I started playing for him, and then I played for him all the way through until I left to go to junior hockey.
You were 12 years old at the time, and I think you had a coach there, the late Gene Alfie Turcotte, who was a former player in the NHL, Michigan hockey pioneer. And he had helped develop a lot of great professional players. Two little factoids here, and I'm going to call him Alfie. I guess that was his nickname.
I got to correct you. Alfie's a son. The dad is Real.
Oh, Real. Okay.
Real was the coach. Alfie. Okay. So Alfie was a couple years older than me, and Alfie was so he was on an older CompuWare team. After this CompuWare program got going, Alfie, Pat LaFontaine were the two big names, and Al Iafredi were the big names on the older team. Me and a couple other guys were on the younger team. I mean, there was 10 teams, but there was midgets and bantams. So, but Alfie's dad, Real, who created Real Turcotte hockey stick handling schools, he was my coach, and at 12 years old, and he was from Montreal. He was French Canadian. I loved the Montreal Canadiens and Guy Lafleur, and that was all and he came to me at 12 years old and said to me, he pulled me aside one day, and I loved him. He was such a great influence. He recently passed away. And his son was Alfie, and his grandson was second pick for the Kings last year, I believe.
It was, and you and he were the only two Americans selected in the top 10 of the draft. You in 1986, and he in 2019. So I believe it was your coach who told you and gave you the confidence where for the first time he said you had a chance to play professional hockey. And what did that do to you as a confidence booster for someone like him? He had worked with so many professionals, and here he is, your coach, and telling you could make it to the bigs one day.
So Real Turcotte, the gentleman I was just referencing, was my coach. He came to me. He played at Michigan State hockey. He was coaching all these different players. He had a stick handling school. He was very in tune, knew a lot of scouts in Montreal, et cetera. He came to me one day and said, "You are one of the most," I think he told me, he says, "other than my son Alfie And Pat LaFontaine was just coming to the program. He said, other than my son, Alfie, you may be the most talented player I've ever coached. And he says, you can make it to the NHL if you work really hard and you have a good frame of mind. So that just boosted me so much, because I knew that was the first time I thought in my head, you know what? I want to be a pro hockey player. And it went from like, I'm pretty good and the team is good and we're having fun, to this is now going to become a more serious endeavor where, yeah, I was still a kid, still having fun playing, doing all the fun stuff. But it's like, okay, I can't skip a practice. I can't, I got to train in the summers. I have to be dedicated if I'm going to try to get to the next level. It just elevated that inner drive from this is fun, it's an activity, to this is fun, it's an activity, but it's serious. I can do this. So you need to sacrifice.
You're 15 and you light it up. You have 159 points, 85 goals, 74 assists, and 65 games. Not too shabby there. At that point, we're just toying with everybody you were playing with and scoring at will?
Well, so I'm not sure if you're referencing junior hockey or midgets, but so I had a big decision. So this will answer your question in a moment. So I had a big decision to make. So I'm playing through the comp year program, and I get to my midget year, 15 years old. I had a very good year. We were doing like 10, 11 tournaments all over Canada, all over, or not less the US, but all over Canada. So now I'm getting recruited by the Western Hockey League, the Ontario Hockey League, and the Quebec Hockey League, and U.S. colleges. So Michigan State, Michigan, Minnesota, one of the Minnesota schools, Harvard. But I had 2 years to I don't know if waste is the right word, but I had 2 years to get there before I'm going to college. I was just finishing my sophomore year of high school, or I could go to junior hockey, which, that's a big risk. If you get hurt and you don't play, et cetera, it was a risk. And so anyways, we got the tour of the Western teams. I ruled that out really quickly, as did my dad. He's like, way too much traveling. You'll never go to school. I mean, we're like, the geographical territory of the Western Hockey League was huge. And then the Ontario and then Quebec. So Quebec, Pat LaFontaine, all-time NHL great and local Detroit great. He had just gone to Montreal Junior Canadiens, Verdun. Well, I was enamored by Montreal. I was enamored by the Montreal Canadiens. So the Montreal Canadiens owned the Verdun Junior Canadiens, and they made a strong pitch for me. And Serge Savard, if you're a hockey guy, you'll know that name. He was the GM of the Montreal Canadiens at the time. He was literally royalty in Montreal and hockey circles. He had won, I think, 10 or 11 Stanley Cups as a player, and he was running the Canadiens now. And he said, we want you. And he was the second person who told me, other than some scouts, you can definitely play in the NHL. And we want you in our junior program, and we will take good care of you, and we will help you develop, et cetera, et cetera. And that personal attention kind of sealed the deal. And then there were some other factors too, but then I left home at 16 roughly, and I had 2 years of junior hockey in Montreal.
You're 16, you're living in Canada, you're playing for the Canadiens junior team, and you're living with a French-Canadian family. What was that like? You are living with a strange family. Did you know the family? Did you speak French at the time?
Did not know the family. I had been taking French class in school back in Detroit at Liggett, University of Liggett, and I knew rudimentary French. I knew more how to conjugate verbs than I knew how to speak or understand. But I really made it a point to immerse myself, and I only spoke French with them, and I loved it for 2 years. I mean, tremendous family, and they had a boy and a girl. The boy became like a little brother. The daughter was like 3. I think the son, his name is Yannick, he was like 11. So he idolized me, and I would bring him to the locker room and bring him around. And he was just, in these Canadian towns, the junior hockey town, like it's a big deal. It's almost like an NHL team. So yeah, I loved it, and I started to learn French and understand French, and tremendous cultural experience. And I'm so happy I went that route, not only from a hockey point of view, but also just the life experiences and living with the French Canadian family at 16.
Would your parents come visit you?
Often.
Watch you play?
Yeah, often. They would, back to that supporting me. They would come a lot, and it was a kind of a big joke because being from an ethnic family, especially the Greeks, like they're all into cooking and making sure their kids get fed. So my mom was always worried to make sure I was eating enough and making sure. So she'd be bringing all kinds of food, and it worked out great. And then it got to be, she was teaching the people that I lived with Greek recipes, and then they were teaching her French Canadian recipes. So it was a lot of fun. But yeah, they came out a lot.
One of my closest friends, Rick Rivera, has 4 kids, 3 sons, and they all played hockey. One of them, Nikki. So there's Jake, Luke, and Nikki. Nikki has a chance to make it to the pros this year, but he and his wife, Dana, go to most of their games. They're flying every other weekend somewhere. And the grandparents went as well. Baki and his wife, they would go and they would fly crazy every place that they could. And this was a regular thing. I often wondered, they sacrificed a lot of their weekends, but they were super supportive parents. They have a great relationship with their kids. And I always thought that was something I really admired. I thought it's great when you have parents who are going to each game, your practices. The parental love, I think, is very important to your development as an athlete mentally from a confidence perspective.
Randy, and no question, and I'll go back to what I said earlier. I mean, my parents were amazing. There was no weekends for them. It was whatever our schedule was. Like if there's a hockey thing, it wasn't even an issue. We're going to like the hockey. Now, granted, in the summer times we would go, like I told you, we'd go to Greece a lot and we would do stuff like that. But when it was hot, like when we had activities, that was the social life. Being a parent now with 4 kids, I mean, they're at various ages, but I know there's a lot of times where I would say, wow, I can't believe my dad did that, because I didn't really want to go to the 7 a.m. practice, wherever. I'd rather go out the night before with a few other couples and sleep in.
So you've got 2 years with the junior Canadians. You have 116 points. The first year, you have 153. The second year, you're having fun. And by then, you're one of the top prospects in the 1986 draft. And you're expected to be the number 1 or number 2 pick overall. And Detroit, our hometown Wings, had the number 1 pick this year. They were the dead Wings, and the Kings had the second pick of the draft. And there was a bunch of chatter in Detroit if they would take you. But I think they were saying from the beginning they planned to select Joe Murphy as the number 1 pick, which they did. And the Kings picked you with the number 2 pick. Did you know the Kings was coming, and how many other teams did you talk to? What were the interviews like?
Yes, coming from Detroit, everyone was talking about, they should draft a hometown kid. And there was a part of me that wished that, but they were the president at the time, Jimmy Devellano, or the GM, was very clear about it. We are drafting Joe Murphy. So I kind of gave that up. I didn't. It was more of a media thing. Oh, why don't they draft a hometown kid? Blah, blah, blah. So I didn't really even think much of it. In hindsight, I think it was the best thing that could have ever happened for me personally, just the style of play, et cetera. So as you're going through this process, you start having some interviews. So I get a call from the Los Angeles Kings. They want me to fly out and give me an interview. So I look back how naive I was. I'd never been to LA. I knew nothing other than Hollywood and TV really about California, let alone LA. So I remember flying in and they picked me up. I knew LA wasn't a huge hockey town. So imagine I grew up in Detroit. Even though they were the dead things, it was still a good hockey town and had a great long original six history. I go to Montreal where hockey is the religion. like hockey comes before everything else. And you live and breathe hockey every moment. And that was the atmosphere I was in for 2 years. And now I'm going to LA, where hockey and the LA Kings are probably about 37th on the list of activities and, things to do in LA. So, but nevertheless, to me, it was NHL. It was very exciting. I got there, and I remember that was the heyday of the Lakers. And the Lakers were, it was showtime, Magic and Kareem and James Worthy, et cetera. So I was excited to go to the Forum, the Fabulous Forum at the time, I think it was called. Not really as much for the hockey. I only knew like Marcel Dion and LA Kings, but I mean, I wanted to go to a Lakers game. And then I got a tour, Rodeo Drive and Santa Monica, and just kind of all the hot spots that I'm sure the touristy things that they bring people in. And then I got to meet Rogie Vachon. He was an all-time great. So he was the general manager. Pat Quinn was the coach. Phil Meir, longtime NHL guy who I still see in Detroit. He lives in Detroit. And Mike Murphy. So I got interviews with all of them, and they showed me the NHL locker room, and it was, I'd see Marcel Dion, and it was, I didn't meet Marcel at the time, but I knew Marcel from Detroit. As I told you earlier, I was going to all the games, and it was a real controversial move when he came to LA. And then I'll never forget, I came up and I met Dr. Buss, Dr. Jerry Buss. That was very interesting. And, but it was just all kind of surreal. I wasn't even 18 yet because my birthday's July 20th. I was turning 18 that July. So here I'm 17 years old, and I'm, having a private meeting with Dr. Jerry Buss, and, talking about the Kings and the Lakers and Magic and all that. So yeah, it was very interesting. I got interviewed by a few other teams, New Jersey Devils, et cetera. And I remember we went to a Mets game with some other prospects. But I had no clue the Kings were gonna draft me. But interesting story if you want to hear how I first heard about the Kings drafting me. And this got a lot of publicity back in the day. I kind of forgot about it until you asked me the question, did you know? So we were staying back then, all the NHL drafts were at the Sheraton. Well, they were at the Montreal Forum, but they were like, everyone stayed at this Le Centre Sheraton, which was the big Sheraton in town in Montreal. So I knew that place very well because my parents coming in almost bi-weekly or almost weekly sometimes, that's where they would stay most of the time. So I was at the Sheraton all the time. So here we are for our draft, and we're at the Sheraton, and we're in a room, and I think it was like one of those adjoining rooms. And I remember hearing all kinds of, actually prior, I remember going to the Montreal Canadiens suite, Serge Savard, come on by this, and he says, we're going to try to get you, but we're too low in the thing. There's no way you'll be there. But so I was talking to him. So we go back up to the room, night before the draft. I'm hearing all kinds of noise in the room directly adjacent to us. And it clearly was deliberations on an organization talking about who they're going to pick and what their draft and whatever else is going on. And I remember very distinctly hearing Pat Quinn's voice, like a very booming voice. And I'm like, that's the LA Kings. So I remember for about 10 minutes putting my ear to the door with the cup and listening. And this is all was, I remember people asking me, and I remember them deliberating if they're going to take me or not. And they all said, yeah, we're going to take him. And I was like, and I went in the other room and I told my parents, I said, I'm going to the Kings tomorrow. They're like, what do you don't know. I said, they're next door, and I just heard them say they're going to take me. So anyways, that's a true story, and you can believe it. And it was 20 years or so ago or longer. The reporters were all asking me, how did you first hear about the Kings? And I remember telling that story, and they were like looking at me like I was weird. I said, no, that's a true story.
So this was back in 1986, and the Kings were coming off of a season where they had only won 23 games. They had missed the playoffs 3 out of the past 4 years. And you said, I think at the time, you had mixed feelings about this a little bit. But on the other side, you had a lot of upside to coming to a team that had missed the playoffs and needed substantial improvement.
Yeah, I mean, okay. When I say I had mixed feelings, the mixed feelings were there was a little part of me that wanted to go to Detroit because it was number one overall and it was hometown. But that was more of a pipe dream because they were very clear they were not going to pick me. They wanted Joe Murphy. So I got over that very quickly. I go to Montreal. I would have loved to have been drafted by the Canadiens. Hockey town, crazy. What I had mixed feelings about was LA was not a hockey town. They were a dormant organization, at least in my mind. I knew nothing about them. They were never making the playoffs. All I knew about them was they had a half-empty stadium, or I should say half-full stadium, glass half full, and they had Marcel Dionne. Other than that, I knew nothing about him. So here I am. I get drafted by him, and I'm still so excited to be second pick overall NHL. But the mixed feelings were like, wow, is this going to be as exciting as if I were in a real hockey town? That's kind of what I meant by the mixed feelings. But in hindsight, it was a great place to go. It was a more offensive division. They needed some help. And, we were an up and coming team.
Tell me about the night before and the day of your first game. Your life dream is about to happen and come true. Did you sleep at all? What were you feeling when you were putting on the uniform, lacing up the skates? You're in the locker room and you're stepping onto the ice for the first time.
So in order to tell you that, I have to just build it up a little bit. So I get to LA and I meet this young rookie, Luc Robitaille, and me and him kind of hit it off a little bit. And the next thing I know, Marcel Dionne comes to me and Luc, and he had already talked to the organization, and he says, hey, I want you guys to live with us. And I said, wow. And really, Luc lived with Marcel, and I lived right next door. And I remember Marcel told me, well, I'm going to bring Luc in with me. He does, his English is so I don't want him with us. I said, oh, that's fine. And he had arranged with his neighbor for me to live with his neighbor, but literally right next door. So here we are in training camp, and I'm going to practice with Marcel Dionne driving. And I was just like, this is insane. So like an all-time great player, someone I idolized growing up. And we're going to lunch together and we're going to practice. And, I'm hearing him complain about how early the traffic and the 405 and Crenshaw's always so damn busy. And, you just like normal stuff. And it was such an amazing thing. So now we're building up. We're getting the training camps over. And now I made the team. Luc made the team. And now we're getting ready for our first game. We get in the car. We're going to the game with Marcel. And well, I'm a nervous wreck. I kept looking at Luc, and he's just like we're just like, this is our first NHL game. And of course, there's butterflies. Now we had played some exhibition games, but still, it's your first NHL game. It's like the real deal. Very nervous. I remember Luc got a goal his first game. I got an assist. I think I got a goal my second game. Once you got on the scoreboard, it alleviated some of the jitters. I just kept saying, prove you belong, prove you belong, prove you belong. Like I just every shift, like prove you belong. That's all. That was my motto.
You killed it that year. You played in every game, 79 points, NHL all-rookie team, candidate for Calder Trophy Rookie of the Year. And that went to Luc. And Luc was the 171st pick of the draft. He had 84 points that year in 79 games. Let's talk about that for a quick minute. I went to Luc's retirement party, and Marty McSorley read his scouting report, which says something like too small, lacks hand-eye coordination, not big enough to play, and not fast enough to make it. And there he was. You guys are both rookies, and he lit it up. What's the story about that? I mean, you hear about Tom Brady, the 6th-round pick, and here's Luc, who finished the highest scoring left wing in NHL history.
So Luc and I were rivals. So going back to junior hockey, we were rivals in junior hockey. We actually played against each other for the championship, and we were both known, and there was another couple guys, but we were kind of like the two stars of the league for that 1 or 2 years. So, and our teams were rivals. He played on the Hull Olympics. I was on the Verdun Junior Canadians. And so we would play them like 7-8 times a year. So I got to know him kind of grudgingly on the ice. There was a lot of, media attention paid to us for different reasons. He was, French Canadian. He was kind of a hometown guy. I was the American following in Pat LaFontaine's footsteps, who was going to be a high pick. So, and then that year, the All-Star game for the Quebec League was in Hull. And I remember just going up to Luke and we were talking, and his English was okay and my French was okay. So it was just kind of one of those things. You knew each other and we developed a bond. So now we show up at training camp together. Well, I knew him right away. He knew me. So we kind of were talking, and we hung out a little bit in training camp, and very quickly we became friends. And I know the scouting report said that, and he was slow and he couldn't, but I saw him play junior hockey and he lit it up and he did very well. So I just didn't think much of it. I just thought, yeah, he's going to be fine. I didn't think he'd be that fine, but like no one knew. So, but he was, the thing about Luke was he had such tremendous enthusiasm. Nothing got him down. He had a great work ethic. And I think for Luke, looking back, and I don't want to speak for him, but from my point of view, I think going to LA was also a great move for him. You're an entrepreneur. You talk a lot of times. You looking for an investment opportunity or a business, and they say it's location, or the right idea. I think that's true in pro sports, because if you go to the wrong organization and you don't get the ability to play, even though you're the exact same person, the same work ethic, the same physical skills, you don't get that opportunity. Sometimes you just don't. Luke and I have actually talked about it. We've known players who played 1 or 2 years in the NHL that if they'd gone somewhere else, they would have had a great career. It's just, I think the stars aligned, and Luke started shining right away. And being with Marcel, I think, was great. He and Marcel were line mates year one. I had Dave Taylor, was a great all-time NHL player and was the captain of the team. And Luke was just so enthusiastic, and right from the get-go, he fit.
The Kings did way better with both of you. They finally made the playoffs, and you were the 4th seed. You lost to the Oilers in 5 games. The first round, who of course were led by Wayne Gretzky, but we're going to get back to Wayne a little later in the show. But were you happy with your performance as a rookie?
Yes, I was thrilled. Early on, you're nervous, but then all of a sudden, as an offensive player, you start getting power play time. You're getting a lot of key minutes, key opportunities, and suddenly you're being considered as part of the nucleus, and you're producing. And of course, there are a lot of times where you're, this game, I was horrible, or you have your doubts, but you're still, an 18-year-old kid in my case, and the coaches are like, "Hey, kid, you had a bad game. Don't worry about it. This happens. Like, hopefully you'll have a decent career and you'll play a lot of more games." And then you have those exhilarating times where you go, get a goal and 3 assists, and you're the first star of the game and the team wins, and you're thinking, wow, this is in the NHL. I can't believe it. And you have those highs and lows, but yeah, there were definitely more highs, and suddenly you're like, wow, I can definitely play in this league, and this is a great spot.
We hear about the hazing of rookies from the veterans. Did you have any of that? And if so, what were some of the things that you had to do?
Yeah, there was a little hazing. I kid Jim Fox, who is the voice of the Kings now, and I see him or talk to him a couple times a year. And he was, back then, he was one of my hazers, as I was a hazy. We were in Winnipeg. It was really not anything crazy, but I remember they shaved like one of my eyebrows, and then they put like a big R. They shave, they don't really tie you down where it's violating, but it was just okay, kid, we all went through this. Be quiet. And I remember they shaved an R in my chest. So there was a big R in my chest, and then they shaved one eyebrow, and then they made you do stuff. Just, go pick all the pucks up, or go buy us something, or you're paying for dinner tonight, or just, it was nothing too crazy. Like you hear some horror stories in college or whatever. It was nothing that you look back at and say that, oh my God, what a horrible experience.
I hope you're enjoying this video so far, but before we jump back in, I want to know if you've ever thought about what you need to do to reach the next level of success in your life. Over the last 25 years, I've been an advisor to more than 50 companies. I've invested nearly 100, including Google, Lyft, and Seagate, and I also co-founded a company that today is worth more than $15 billion. I've been incredibly blessed in my journey, and at this stage in my life, I want to give back. I want to share the lessons I've learned so you can reach incredible success way faster than I did. In my own journey, I've learned that having the right mentor is a massive advantage to achieving our goals. I'm hugely passionate about mentoring others, and I'm looking for a few hungry entrepreneurs who are excited to take action on their journey to incredible future success. So if that's you, I've got an opportunity. In the description of this video, there's a link where you can apply to work with me. All you need to do is answer a few simple questions, and if you're a good fit, my team will reach out so we can build a game plan together. All right, now let's get back to the video. So we'll talk about your second season for a second. You had 107 points, your second season, 55 goals, 52 assists. At this point, I think you're 19, one of the best players in the league and probably one of the best players in the world. And team makes the playoffs again. You lose again in the first round to the Flames. At this point, you're settling in. And before we move to the rest of your career, I want to talk about the ownership of the team, which is players I know is really important to you and to the team's culture. I want to start with the late Jerry Buss, and then I want to talk about Bruce McNall, both larger-than-life figures and both visionaries. Let's start with Jerry. Jerry grew up in poverty and built a huge commercial real estate empire in 1979. He buys the LA Lakers, the Kings, and the Los Angeles Forum for $67.5 million, which back then was an enormous sum of money. By the time you came in, he had owned the team for 5 years. You've told me some pretty good stories about your time with Dr. Buss, actually some funny and crazy ones, which I don't think we can repeat here. But please tell me what he was like and how it was playing for him, and then give us a story or two that you can share.
So Dr. Buss, I think, was, like you said, a real innovator, and he bought the Kings, Lakers, and the Forum from Jack Kent Cooke, who he was a legend in his own way. So we didn't really see Dr. Buss a lot because the Lakers were, you look at this organization, you have the Forum with all these huge concerts coming in. Anyone you can imagine went through the Forum. And you had the Lakers, who were winning championship after championship. Them and the Celtics were the two elites, Bird, Magic, et cetera, were the two elites of the NBA. So the Lakers were Showtime. And then you had the Kings, who really weren't, they were there, they were a tenant, they just, they really hadn't had much success. So we would see him occasionally in the locker room. I told you that story when I met him, when I first met him. And then...
cannot be repeated.
What's that?
It cannot be repeated.
Yeah. So, but he was a very nice man, but he would come down. I remember he kind of had an entourage around him. He was a true celebrity. And I really didn't get to know him that closely, other than, when we would win a big game or occasionally, you could. And back then, the owner's suite or box was cut out in the stands. There was it was right behind the net. There was maybe 2/3 of the way up the concourse or the seating. They had 3 or 4 rows blocked out, and that was the owner's suite. So you could see him there. And a lot of times he would leave early, but there was a lot, we'd win a game or two. He'd come down. I remember getting pictures with him, and there was always celebrities in the locker room after a big win. And I have this picture of, I still have it, of me and Luke and our respective dads and Dr. Buss. And that was, the first or second season. And that was great. So like I said, I don't really have a lot of personal stories with Dr. Buss, other than, he was the owner and he was there. And then we started hearing rumblings during the year of there's this guy, Bruce McNall, who, I would read the LA Times or whatever, you'd read a little bit, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, there's negotiations. Dr. Buss may be selling the team. So you don't know. I mean, I'm a rookie in the NHL. Your team's going to get sold. You don't know. You're thinking about your next practice or game, and then all of a sudden they call a meeting, and there's Dr. Buss and this other guy who had never seen. And the deal was that Bruce got, I think he bought 25% of the team with an option for another 24%.
That's exactly right.
And I think that was either during my first year or the beginning of the second year.
Right. So he bought 25% your rookie year, the other 24% the following year. And then the following year, he bought the rest of it, 1988.
That's right. So he, no, I think he consummated the deal earlier than that. I don't know. We'd have to see, but it was 25 and 24. But then I think he said, you know what, let me just have it. And I had heard years later from Bruce some different stories on how that deal went through. So, but anyways, long story short, Dr. Buss was on his way out to only focusing in on the Lakers, and Bruce McNall was becoming the sole, from minority to sole owner. And even when he was minority, he was in that locker room every day. He started befriending us. He was the presence. He was the gregarious guy, and he was bringing in Rob Lowe and all kinds of celebrities into the locker room on a regular basis.
Right. So Bruce, as you know, another larger than life figure. He also came from nothing and built a fortune in the coin business, then sold antiquities, then branched out into movies, and finally into professional hockey. Tell me about Bruce and what he was like, your relationship with him and the team, and his relationship with the fans. And then we're going to talk about afterward what happened to him.
So Bruce, right away, was not a typical owner. And I didn't know that at the time, by the way, other than I had Dr. Buss. But he very much got involved. Like, he was in that locker room at all times, before the game, after the game. Maybe in between periods, you'd see him scoot by. He was there. Now, of course, as a player, you're dealing with your coaches, your training staff. But now you have the owner come in before the game and saying, hey, Jimmy, come here. I want you to sign this for me. Hey, Jimmy, I'm going to come in afterwards. I'm going to introduce you to someone. And stuff like that. So I developed a pretty, I'd say closer relationship with him. I know Luke did as well. I can't speak for a lot of the players. I don't, but I think he had a few people that he was kind of conversing with more than others. And it then became more like in the off season, hey, why don't you come to my office? I'd like to buy you lunch. I'm going to show you what I do. And I remember somehow he had mentioned something about Ronald Reagan. He goes, you want to meet him? I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll meet Ronald Reagan. And he's like, yeah, look, hang on. Hey, and he'd call his secretary and he'd be like, assistant, hey, call President Reagan's office and get Jimmy an appointment to go meet him. And I was like, okay. Like, it was that's just kind of how he operated. And then, a week later, I'd get a call saying, okay, you've got an appointment at 1:00 to meet President Reagan. He was a former president, but the point he was in Century City, is where he had his office there. So stuff like that. He's like, one time I asked him, hey, I'm looking for, I don't know, his tickets for something. And he's like, oh, how many do you need? Like, he was always just kind of like, he was just that larger than life, trying to please everyone kind of guy. So I got a good relationship with him. I actually invested in some of his coins. He told me about it way back when he started getting some players involved. And hey, why don't you, if you're interested, I got this, I got that. And then at the end of my second year, he says to me, hey, come to my office. So I go to Century City, I go through, and he is making a real name for himself. Like, he becomes the NHL chairman of the NHL, chairman of the board of the NHL. And he's talking all kinds of stuff. And he's like, you know what, Jimmy, we need to sign you to a long-term deal. He says, go buy a house. I'm like, I'm 19. okay, go buy a house. And he goes, oh, my wife, Jane, she's an interior decorator. She'll outfit it for you. Here's Jane's card. Call her. She knows you'll be calling. Like he just moved quick. He says, you go find a house and tell me when you got it. And then we'll start negotiating a long-term deal. And Jane will come, Jane will outfit it for you. And this was all like in June. And I remember buying a house in Redondo Beach, and Jane, his wife at the time, they've since separated or since divorced, very nice lady, very accomplished. She basically helped me outfit the house. So here I am, a 19-year-old kid, just finished my second year, got a beautiful home in Redondo Beach, fully outfitted. And I'm now going to go home to Detroit for the summer for about a month and then come back for training camp. And we had started negotiating a longer term contract.
Right. We'll talk about the contract and the future after that in a few minutes. I do want to talk a little bit about Bruce and his career and some of the things that happened to him. So he was Mr. Hockey for the league, really the representative of a league, loved the sport, loved the players, loved Hollywood. In terms of Hollywood, he owned a movie studio that at the time produced some of the largest movies. And then the studio got in trouble. It was run by a guy named David Begelman, and I think there may have been some fraud involved. And next thing you know, David Begelman has committed suicide in the Century Plaza Hotel, and Bruce was in trouble financially. And what happened at that point next?
Well, okay, so the bullet points were, as I remember them, Bruce had three kind of businesses. He had an ancient coin business, which really got him on the map. He had the movie, making movies, and then he had horses. He had Summa Stables, I think it was called. I think it was Numismatic Fine Arts. I forgot the movie company, and then Summa Stables. So he owned Seattle Slew's breeding rights or something, the Triple Crown winner. So it was just like a tremendous amount of, and then he bought the Kings. So of course at the time I don't know, I don't know when the financial troubles hit. It was none of my business. I mean, I've read his book and he's told me stuff, but at some point, I think it started a year or two later, but what do I know? He started having, I think, financial issues. And then that's where I think the legal issues arose from, and trying to keep everything afloat is what I think.
Right. So he needed to borrow money to improve his own financial situation. So what he did is he created fake invoices for the coins and then took out a loan of, I think, $100 or $200 million against these fake invoices. The collateral wasn't there. He made it up. And to get himself out of this financial trouble, he had arranged to sell the team to Sony. And it was 48 hours away from closing. And he was basically going to wash his hands of the whole thing. He'd put the money back. He would sell the team, but he would not be in financial trouble. And of course, one of the auditors noticed something, and then his world unraveled. He went to prison for fraud. This was a guy who was on top of the world. He was living his dream. He had come from poverty. This was a guy who at one time, this is pre-NetJets world, owned 7 jets outright and 4 helicopters. And this was a guy who regularly had Sting over for dinner, who played the piano for he and his 2 kids and for Jane. So he goes to prison and he keeps all of his friends. He's in prison in Northern California, but he had everyone still coming to visit him. You really find out who your friends are when you're down. Gretzky came to visit him. Magic Johnson came to visit him. The CEO of Disney came to visit him. And he was such a distraction to the prison. They moved him to Milan, Michigan, which is in the middle of nowhere.
That's where I would go visit him.
That's where you would go visit him, as did a lot of people. I mean, it was hard. You're playing hockey and you want to go there. And from what I understand, it was a bit of a drive.
So Milan is, I think it's pronounced Milan, Michigan Federal Penitentiary. Metro Detroit, you know where Ann Arbor is. It's like 45 minutes, I think, south of Ann Arbor. And so it's from my house in Metro Detroit, it was about an hour and 40 minutes. So funny story, I probably visited him 3 or 4 times. So I go to visit him. I had never been to a federal penitentiary, and I go there, and I drive an hour and 40 minutes away, and and he knew about it, that I was going to come, and I get to the they screen you and whatever they're doing. It's very intense, and they're like, you can't go in. I'm like, why? Well, you have khaki pants on. I'm like, well, that's the rule. The prisoners have khaki pants. I'm like, well, what? You can't come in. That's the rule. So I'm like, they said, don't you have any pants in the car? I said, I don't know. I just wore my pants from home. I don't have other pants. So I remember going, and I'm like, oh my God, I felt so guilty. I thought Bruce is going to think I stood him up. So I'm calling people I know in LA, get Bruce a message. I said, can I give him a message? No, he'll figure it out. I'm like, oh my gosh. So finally I got him a message that there was a wardrobe malfunction. there was a pants issue. So years later, I was talking to Mike Ilitch, the owner of the Detroit Red Wings, who he passed a few years ago. Wonderful person. I became pretty close to him. And he was a friend of Bruce's too. Well, he told me the same story. He's like, Jimmy, I told him, I go visit Bruce. He goes, Jimmy, I went there. I was so nervous. I went there. Now, this is the owner of the Red Wings, Little Caesars Pizza, a big mogul in his own, he gets there with khaki pants and they won't let him in. So he goes back and he goes, I was so shaken up. He said, I wrote this 2-page note to Bruce saying, I'm sorry, I just can't do it. I can't come visit you, but the moment you're out, I'm going to visit you. He said, I got stopped there because of my khaki pants. So anyway, I never wore khaki pants again. So I visited him 2 or 3 times in jail, and we, it's an interesting discussion because he's, at a low point, and I was trying to be supportive, and I just wanted to be a friend and really not judge him and just kind of. But on the flip side, there's a lot of stuff why'd you trade me? How'd that go down? What about this? What about how'd it work with the whole Gretzky thing? And then, just you would talk about a lot of people that you had interactions with. And of course, his thing was so public, his downfall. And you would talk, so it was fabulous conversation. And he told me the whole story about Sony. And he was going to get a 7-year contract to be CEO or chairman of the board of this new Sony organization that was going to own the Kings and the Lakers. And we weren't going to have the Staples Center. It was going to be the Sony Center. And, and he was talking to me about downtown. He says, oh, yeah, downtown LA is where it's all going to happen. Well, I lived in LA for a few years. No one went to downtown LA. You went to the beach area or West LA. You may go down to downtown LA occasionally. Well, now, of course, that's all changed. But he was telling me way back in Milan, Michigan, that's going to be where it's all going to happen is, like downtown LA is going to be the new sports mecca of LA.
So back to Bruce's prison term. Interesting story here. So Ken Starr was the Attorney General during the Clinton administration. Clinton had been investigated for the Whitewater investigation with he and his wife. And at one point, Ken Starr asked for the flight logs in his first presidential run. Bruce actually owned the plane, the 727 that he loaned to Bill Clinton.
I know that.
And Ken Starr wanted the flight logs. And Bruce said, I'm not giving you the flight log. So fast forward to a couple of years, Ken Starr shows up unannounced at Bruce's sentencing hearing, and Bruce guidelines for what he did, I think, was a 3-year prison term. And Ken Starr shows up and tells the judge, this defendant helped cost the American taxpayers $80 million. And the judge threw the book at him. He got 5 years in prison, the maximum sentence. So kind of a crazy story there. I met Bruce through you in 2001. He had just been released.
So Randy, that's one of the stories that Bruce told me. And, we're talking about log talks in Milan, Michigan, stuff like that was being told. And I'm like, whoa. Yeah, he's just telling me, he said, yeah, I have the flight logs. He said, it was my plane. And he was telling me stories like that. It was just like, you'd shake your head saying, oh, wow, that's pretty interesting stuff.
Jennifer Flowers apparently lived on a plane with him, but we'll move on to something else. I was saying I met Bruce in 2001. He had been released from prison. He was living in a halfway house. And you said to me, Randy, you should go meet him. You said he was a great guy. You would enjoy each other's company. And I had read about him. I had read, here's a guy who had a huge downfall, was on top of the world. And I'd read in the Los Angeles Times, he has all these people coming to visit him, which says something about him. He's a great guy. He treated people well. And so I said, sure, I'd love to meet him. And you were 100% right. We became good friends. I got to know Bruce very well throughout the years. And I thanked you for the intro, and I want to thank you now. Anyone who knows Bruce has a bunch of great Bruce stories, and I'm going to take a couple minutes to share two of mine. When I got to know Bruce, whenever the Red Wings were in town, my ex-wife and I and he and his girlfriend, Dana, would go to the games with him. And what an experience this was. We had VIP access to everything, which meant we went into the Staples Center through the private entrance, and we were walking around the tunnels of Staples Center before the game, which I'd never seen. I thought that was so cool. And it had been many years since he had owned the team, but there were a lot of people who worked there who had been there a very long time. And every single one of them who had been there a long time came up to Bruce, say hello, give him a hug. And at some point, I want to get some pizza and some cotton candy. So we walk into the main concourse. And the next thing I know, people started rushing over towards us. And I'm not exaggerating. It was like we were with Drake or walking with Mick Jagger. There were 50 people, 3 people deep, following us as we were walking, yelling, Bruce, Bruce, with people shoving programs and Sharpies in front of them, sign this. It was really, really great. Here he was years later, the guy that brought hockey to Los Angeles, and the fans absolutely loved him. And so did the players. We stayed after the games. We waited for the players to come out of the locker room, and we were hanging out where they all parked their cars, which I think is super cool. And they would all come up to him. They would hug him as well. And it's interesting. I've been around a few other owners of professional teams over the years, and I've never seen any owner or player have that kind of affection with one another. So it says a lot about him, and it was fun for me. It was like I was walking with the biggest celebrity in the house, and it was really funny. There was one guy as we were walking, and the guy had a tray full of beer, and he was coming the other way, and he sees Bruce, and he starts backing up, and there was just a throng of people around us, and Bruce accidentally knocked the guy. He had like 4 beers in the tray, and the beer flew everywhere. A little bit on Bruce, but it probably around 10 different people. And Bruce and I were looking at each other. We were laughing our asses off. It was funny. But there's a second story which I have to tell as well. So I was sitting again with Bruce, my ex-wife, his girlfriend. We were at a restaurant in Brentwood called Toscana. And we were talking about, hey, what are you doing now? And he'd been in the movie business. So he's back to being a producer. He had a partner. And I said, hey, Bruce, what are you working on? He said, I'm working on this movie called Alpha Dog. It's starring Sharon Stone and Justin Timberlake. And I said, Sharon Stone. I said, why aren't I in that movie? Yeah. And I get up, I go to the bathroom 5 minutes later. I come back, and he said, you have a casting call Monday morning. This is a Saturday night. And I look at him, I say, ha, yeah, right, Bruce. And my ex-wife says to me, he really called. And I said, Bruce, are you serious? Monday? He said, yeah, Monday. And I show up on Monday. I knew nothing about the movie business, was never in a play, took an acting class in college. That was it. And I show up, they tell me where to show up. I'm in this office, and there's all these young kids there with scripts in front of them with the agency's name on the cover, CAA, William Morris, and they're pacing around, they're nervous, they're flipping through. And here I am, I'm looking around thinking, I don't have 90 minutes to be here. I really can't wait here. I had a job and I got to go back to work. But meanwhile, I finally get called in. I'm sitting there. I'm with the casting director, and we're sitting in the office. We're shooting the shit. And he said, oh, yeah, you're a Detroit fan, hockey fan, Bruce, cool. And then in walks Nick Cassavetes. He was a big director at the time. He had just come off the movie The Notebook. This was a huge deal. This was his next movie. And he sits down, he flops himself on the chair, and he says, so you're a friend of Bruce? Yeah. I understand you want to be in the movie. Yeah. He said, all right, you're in the movie. I said, just like that? Just like that. So I show up. So he sends me, I don't even get a script at home. I'm waiting for the call. I finally get a call. Come and show up in this location. I showed up in the location. I took a bus. I played a police officer who was taking a missing person report from Sharon Stone. The movie was about a middle-class drug dealer who was kidnapped and held ransom for his younger brother who was killed. And this is a true story about Jesse James Hollywood. Family grew up in the Valley. And I was to play a police officer. And I get there, I take a bus, you go to a parking lot, they shuttle you over, I take a bus. Nick said, come find me when you're there. Someone checked me in. He said, you have to get into a police uniform. So I get into a police uniform. I had no idea what I was doing. They gave me a gun in the holster, obviously a fake gun. It looked like a real gun. They said, whatever you do, don't take out the gun. And so I had no idea where to go. I was nervous, was completely out of my mind. And I said, where's Nick Cassavetes? And people are looking, say, well, he's really busy right now. I said, yeah, well, he told me to come find him. So we were shooting in a neighborhood in the Valley. And I go up and I see Nick, and there's a bunch of people near him, right? They're surrounding him. He's a director. He's setting up the next scene. And I go over to him. I'm in a police uniform at this point. I've got the hat, the uniform. I have some fake name on my tag. And I said, excuse me, Nick, you remember me? And he looks at me, sort of funny. Oh, Randy Kaplan, Bruce's friend. Yeah. So he said, okay, here's what you're going to do. He told me at that point what my role was going to be. And he just yelled out, he said to me, you have a pen and piece of paper? I said, no. So he just yelled out into the air, pen, piece of paper. And someone put the pen and piece of paper right in front of his face. And this was a neighborhood, so there were police around to guard the scene. So he calls over one of the police officers and he said, okay, Randy's playing a police officer. He explains it. He's taking a missing person report. What would you say? So he said, give me your name, date of birth, social, et cetera, et cetera. So he said, Randy, write this down. And I'm scribbling as fast as I can. So he said, okay, go over into the house. You'll be there. We'll wait for you. And I go over to the house, and basically I'm sitting in a room. There's 10 cameras, 50 boom microphones. I'm on a couch. I'm actually on the ottoman in front of the couch, and it's facing a couch. Yeah, this was a chair with the ottoman in front of it next to the couch. And so there are all these people on the couch wearing name tags. And I'm in there for an hour. They're doing the lighting. And I go over and I say to this guy who looked like he was in charge, I said, excuse me. I said, why don't I have a name tag? And he said, no, you're in the movie. And I went back and I said, okay. I was too afraid to say, well, what does that mean? So at some point, maybe I was there 90 minutes now, they call in, they said, first team. So first team meant the actors came in and these people who were the stand-ins left. And now I understood what they were saying. And Sharon Stone sits down right next to me on the couch. And she had stone face. She was looking straight ahead, did not acknowledge me at all. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is unbelievable. It's on my bucket list to be in a movie. Here I am. And I'm thinking, my boys in Detroit will never believe in a million years where I am.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, I'm so nervous. I have not recited a single line in my life. Sharon Stone is sitting next to me, one of the biggest movie stars in the world, and she ignores me. And I'm thinking, I said to her, you know what? I'm going to introduce myself. So I turn to her and I say, excuse me, Sharon. And she turns to me and I said, hi, I'm Randy. Nice to meet you. And she nods her head and didn't even look at me. She was looking straight ahead. And Nick comes in. He said, is everyone ready? Everyone's ready. And I was going to start the scene. So he said, action. And I knew that meant we were going to start the scene. And Sharon, you could see her start trembling. So I sort of waited. And her face, I mean, this was long delivery. She was waiting and waiting and waiting. And she said, where's my son? And I put, excuse me, we got to go back, name, date of birth, social. Nick says, cut. What's up? Well, you got to wait for the answer. Name, give her the answer, date of birth, social. And we do it again. And at this point, she starts yelling at me, where's my son? And I'm sitting in the chair. Holy shit. I start leaning back. And again, if someone yells at you, it's your reaction is you got to pause and kind of wait. And the eruption was, I was not really prepared for that. I didn't have a read through. I messed it up again. And Nick says, cut. And now Sharon's pissed at me. And I'm thinking, I'm going to get tossed off the set. And finally I calmed down and it all went well. And I did a good job. And at some point, Nick comes over and he whispers something to me. He said, Randy, he said, forget that Sharon Stone right next to you. He said, do you have an ability to piss people off? And if you know me, it's sort of a laughable question because I definitely have the quality I can piss people off. And he said, forget she's Sharon Stone. I want you to go after her and I want you to piss her off. Be aggressive, interrupt her. And so it was sort of fun. I was getting coaching for all of this. And off I went. I was aggressive with her. It was super fun for me. I absolutely loved it. The thing went down. And the funny thing about this all happened obviously because of Bruce. I hit something on my bucket list. I got paid that day, I think $600. And I got to tell you, I still get checks today, residual checks. And I don't want to brag, Jimmy, and I owe this all to you. I probably should give you a commission on this. So here it goes. I made $1.57 last year, and I made $2.84 the year before. Right. I've gotten residual checks for 4 cents over the last 10 or 15 years. So thank you. I really do owe you a commission for all of this. And it all comes from your introduction to Bruce.
There you go. Very good. Yeah, I mean, look, everyone who knows Bruce has a lot of stories. I haven't seen him in a couple of years. Every time I do go to LA, back before COVID, when going to a few Kings games here and there, I would try to say hi to him or whatever. And, I think it's one of those stories of a lot of great stuff and probably some ugly stuff, but he always treated me very well and for the most part. And we all have great stories about him, and I wish everyone well. And I hope he's doing well. And I'm not sure exactly what he's doing, but I know he's worked hard to try to make a comeback and carry on with his life.
I hope you're enjoying this video so far, but before we jump back in, I want to know if you've ever thought about what you need to do to reach the next level of success in your life. Over the last 25 years, I've been an advisor to more than 50 companies. I've invested nearly 100, including Google, Lyft, and Seagate. And I also co-founded a company that today is worth more than $15 billion. I've been incredibly blessed in my journey, and at this stage in my life, I want to give back. I want to share the lessons I've learned so you can reach incredible success way faster than I did. In my own journey, I've learned that having the right mentor is a massive advantage to achieving our goals. I'm hugely passionate about mentoring others, and I'm looking for a few hungry entrepreneurs who are excited to take action on their journey to incredible future success. So if that's you, I've got an opportunity. In the description of this video, there's a link where you can apply to work with me. All you need to do is answer a few simple questions, and if you're a good fit, my team will reach out so we can build a game plan together. All right, now let's get back to the video. He's a great guy. You know what else he did for me? Very generous. I think I started an event called the Justice Ball. It benefits an organization called Bedzedic Legal Services. Bedzedic helps 12,000 people a year obtain free legal aid, poor, sick, elderly, and the homeless. And at the Justice Ball one year, we started doing a silent auction. And I go to Bruce, and sometimes, you want these one-off things. So he donated a dinner with him, going to whatever hockey game that he wanted to, and spending a night with somebody. I mean, how generous is that? Who does that? And I really appreciate it. He's just been a great friend. The item went, by the way, for $14,000. So can you imagine being a hockey fan and bidding on that type of thing?
I don't know if you remember this, Randy, but after we had met, I came to the Justice Ball and I brought Luke, and the B-52s were playing. And you were all excited. He said, we got the B-52s. Love Shack, whatever. And so we flew out, and
I remember.
I called Luke and I said, come on, let's go to this thing. And I introduced. So, on a personal note, I want to just compliment you. One thing I've always admired about you is since I've met you, I didn't really know you like pre-Akamai, and they never really never meant anything to me. Like, okay, you did well, you had whatever, the money stuff, all that stuff, it didn't really faze me. What I admired was I could always have a conversation with you, and you were very in tune. You weren't coming at it from a point of like, I've done this, so you listen to me. It was very much you would treat everyone, like when we would chat, very respectfully. But I admire your work ethic. So the few things that I've known you've done over the years, and I can only imagine what you did in the Akamai days, which I didn't know you really then, pre-Akamai to get there, is I seen what you've done with the Justice Ball, with some of your private, even hearing you tell this story with Sharon Stone, I could just imagine you preparing and taking notes that night before. You were going to be ultra prepared, and anything you have ever done. That's why I'm sure this podcast, I'm not sure other than the Randall Kaplan or Randy Kaplan show, what you're calling it, but I'm sure it'll be very successful because you are a master of preparation and hard work, and whatever you do, you'll be successful in. So there's a little compliment for you.
That's very kind, too generous, but thank you. There's a footnote to the Sharon Stone story, by the way.
There's more.
A good friend of ours, her best friend and I are good friends. And we were invited to a charity event at Sharon's house. She's very charitable. She does amazing things for people. And so my wife, Madison, and I went to her house, and we spent a night with her, and I had a chance, to talk to her. And I said, by the way, do you remember the movie Alpha Dog? And I said, of course I do. And do you remember the guy who played the police officer? She said, yeah, vaguely. I mean, she didn't know where this was going. I said, well, that was me. And that was a really fun thing for me. And so, yeah, I remember you. I don't think she had a single clue, but I did get to meet her, and it was super fun. And she's a gracious person. So that was the footnote to that. Let's get back to the career. You had this conversation with Bruce in the office. You're talking about a long-term deal with the Kings. Bruce tells you you're one of the building blocks of the future. And then August 9th, 1998 happens, and you're involved in one of the biggest trades in professional sports history. It's a blockbuster trade that sends you, Marty Jelinas, 3 first-round picks and $15 million in cash to the Edmonton Oilers in exchange for Wayne Gretzky, Martin McSorley, and Mike Krushelnyski, a trade that many people believe really changed the history of the NHL. At the time, the Oilers were coming off of 4 Stanley Cup championships in 5 seasons, and Wayne Gretzky is considered the greatest player of all time. He had spent his whole career there. And the backlash here is just enormous. It triggered death threats against Peter Pocklington, the owner of the Oilers at the time, backlash against Wayne Gretzky because his new wife, the actress Janice Jones, people wondered, is he coming to Los Angeles for her? And the trade upset so many Canadians that I think one elected official demanded the government try to block it. Pocklington was burned in effigy. Gretzky was called a traitor by a lot of his countrymen. And Janet Gretzky was branded as the Yoko Ono. So let's go for the trade. I want to hear all about it. What happened here? When did you find out? Tell us everything.
So I told you, I buy this house in Redondo Beach. Bruce's wife outfits it for me, etc. I'm 19, and I leave LA. Bruce's last kind of talk to me was, hey, let's start talking about a long-term deal. You, Luke, and Steve Duchesne, who was also an all-rookie member, you are the future of this team. We have a great future. So I go home, excited, pumped up, training. Probably around 3rd week of July, I get a call from Bruce, which I thought was odd. He calls me, hey, Jimmy, what's going on? This and that. He goes, I really need to talk to you. It's important. I'm like, oh, what's up? He goes, I got really good news. I think we're going to get Wayne Gretzky in a trade. I'm like, what? Like that's unheard of. Wayne Gretzky in a trade, like who? You don't sell Wayne Gretzky, you don't trade Wayne Gretzky. You like he just it is what it is. He goes, the bad news is they want you to go. I'm like, oh, so you're saying, I was thinking in my head, bad news for me, but maybe not bad news for you. So, but he's like, I'm doing everything I can to keep you out, but I don't know. And I was like, and, you know, of course, back then, no cell phones. It was like, I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? He's like, no, I'm not. He goes, I'll do my best to try to keep you out. So, of course, I didn't think that was a very strong endorsement of your staying. But I didn't think the trade would happen. I couldn't envision that he was going to actually pull that off until 3 weeks later on August 9th at 8 a.m. in the morning, I get a call from Bruce. And he goes, and I could tell right away when hey, Bruce, what's up? It wasn't that gregarious, fun-loving guy. He was very somber. He goes, Jimmy, I don't know how to tell you this, and I'm really, really sad. Or I don't think he was sad, but sorry. He goes, but we just made a trade with the Edmonton Oilers for Wayne Gretzky, and you've been traded to the Edmonton Oilers. I'm like, what? I was just shocked. And he told me on that call, he says, don't worry, I'll try to get you back. And I thought, oh, what, so, your whole persona brand of, first 2 years in the NHL, you've grown into this being an LA King thing, living in LA, creating some roots there, and now you're just uprooted. And not just uprooted for any trade, uprooted for a trade that, like you said, like there's a resolution in the Canadian Parliament to rescind the trade on national security interests. Like, he's a national treasure. We cannot allow this to happen. And, like Peter Jennings and Tom Brokaw, it was leading story everywhere. And literally, as soon as I hung up with Bruce, I don't know how they did it back then, if they timed it. The moment I hung up, like within 3 minutes, I had people knocking on I was at my parents' house wanting to interview me. And I mean, like lots of people, print reporters, ESPN, CNN Sports. I'm like, there were cars coming down the street with the big satellite dish, like the trucks. And I'm just like dumbfounded. Like this is now it's just the media avalanche is opening up. And of course, that's minor compared to what was happening in LA, because there it was just, 10 times with everything was going on. Wayne was flying in and this and that. So it was just a whirlwind. And I didn't hear anything from the Oilers for like 2 more days. I'm like, I was traded, or maybe the next day. I don't know. It felt like 2 days. And then I got a call from Glenn Sather saying, hey, Jimmy, how are you? I'm sure by now you've been traded. I said, oh, yes, I'm well aware. So then they flew me in. But it was just a surreal feeling, because it truly was the largest trade in the history of sports, I believe, and it did revolutionize hockey. It really created hockey on the West Coast, the expansion, the Ducks, San Jose, Arizona, like that whole, it just expanded the footprint of hockey in the United States, and the exposure just increased dramatically.
Did you hear about Wayne's perspective at the time, how the whole thing went down?
I had heard snippets, but nothing that I could say firsthand. I had heard everything from he was really upset with the Oilers because he was on a call. He was in Bruce's office, and Bruce was negotiating with Pocklington, and Bruce like shushed him and said, don't talk, and put it on speaker. And he heard Pocklington saying not flattering things about Wayne. I don't even know if that's true or not. I'd heard that. And that's when Wayne said, that's it, pull the trigger, Bruce. I had heard other things that Wayne had wanted to be traded and was going to go to Vancouver, and that there was a deal all set for that to happen, maybe even the Red Wings. And then Bruce got in the mix. So to be honest, I don't even know what's really true, if Wayne really wanted it, or it was Pocklington just trying to he was having financial issues of himself. So people always tell me, wow, what does it feel, all these interviews over the years, what's it feel like to have, be the main player in the Wayne Gretzky trade? I said, actually, the main player was the sack full of $15 million. So that was the main player. But, so it was surreal.
So what I had read, and I read this in several sources in the press, and I assume you never assume the press has it right, but 2 hours after the Oilers won the Cup in 1988, his dad, Walter, told him that the Oilers were planning to deal him to another team. And I think his dad had known for months about the news, but kept it from Wayne. And as you said, Pocklington was struggling big time, and he did shop the team to Los Angeles, Detroit, and Vancouver. And Wayne at first didn't want to go, or didn't want to leave. And he insisted that Marty McSorley come and Mike Krushelnyski come. And McSorley, as you know, was the enforcer. Don't mess with Wayne or you're going to get your ass kicked by Marty. And at that point, I think Glenn Sather, the coach of the Oilers, he tried to stop the deal too. And then when he found out that Gretzky was involved in the negotiations, Gretzky changed the attitude and he wanted to come to the Kings. So
I think Bruce, I do not know if this is accurate, but from what I've read and heard, there was a deal with Vancouver that Wayne said no. There was a potential deal with the Red Wings that Wayne was open to. But then Bruce put the full court, what kind of charming guy he is. He flew him to LA and he wined and dined him and this and that, and we could change hockey together and blah, blah, blah. And I think he wore Wayne down. And then it was a decision of like, okay, if I'm going to get traded, I'd rather go to LA. But like I said, it's all speculation. I don't know.
So the trade happens. You're now in the frozen tundra, and it's a disappointing season for the Oilers. They finished third in the division. Then the playoffs come around, and the Oilers are eliminated in 7 games by the Kings in the first round. So, the irony of that, what was that like? You're playing against your old team where you never wanted to leave, and you're playing against your buddies. You guys were actually the favorites, and you were, I think, leading at one point, 3-1 series lead. And then Gretzky did his thing, and they lead to a comeback and win the series 4-3. What was that like? That had to hurt a little bit.
Yeah, well, backtrack a little. So it was an interesting season because, like you said, you'd go to games and you'd see the owner of the team being burned in effigy in the rafters, and every single media story was about how could they do this and Wayne Gretzky and this and that. And so it was a constant drumbeat of negativity but we actually had a decent season. Then we tailed off at the end, but then we went into the playoffs. You got to remember, there was a lot of good players, like all-time great players on the Edmonton Oilers. Mark Messier, Grant Fuhrer, Yari Curry, Kevin Lowe. I mean, we're talking all-time excellent. Glenn Anderson, great players. So we had played the Kings a number of times. I think we probably led the season series against them. It was always bittersweet for me whenever we go back to LA. Remember that home I was telling you about in Redondo Beach? Well, my sister, who was going to college in LA, she took it over. She was going to college, living there. She invited a college roommate to live in there with her, who ended up becoming my wife. So I would like just show up to this beautiful house I'd spent like 2 nights in. I would sleep there the night. I said to my sister, I said, okay, I just want the house when I come in to play the Kings, which was like, 4 days a year. And then we play them in the playoffs. So it was always very bittersweet. You knew all these friends and people, but you're out of the loop. It was a different team, a different jersey color, different. It was, the Gretzky show. And we were up 3-1. And then the big story was Bruce McNall brought Ronald Reagan in to the locker room, and he gave them a win one for the Gipper speech. I don't know if you ever knew this. This was a big thing at the time. So this is game 5. So we're up 3-1, game 5 at the Forum, and win one for the Gipper, and they come out and beat us. So now we go back to Edmonton. And I remember that we were all laughing hysterically as the Oilers. Peter Pocklington tried to to one up. I don't know, one up, but he tried to, he felt pressure to do something because Bruce brought in Ronald Reagan. He brought in, I forgot his name, Youppi, the mascot for the Montreal Expos. And we were all in the locker room, right before we're going to go on the ice. And here comes this mascot from the Montreal Expos. He was a big, whatever. He comes in and he was laughing, and we were all looking at ourselves like, what is this? So anyways, we lose a close game 6, and then we went in and they brought in Reagan again, win one for the Gipper, and they beat us in 7. So it was it was one of those made for Hollywood moments where the Kings win in 7 against the team that Gretzky came from.
So you make the move, and obviously Southern California, very different than Edmonton, Canada, which I think of is sort of the frozen tundra. I have a friend who lives there, said it's obviously very, very cold there. But just coming as the other main player on side of the Gretzky trade, that has to be absolutely the worst place you want to be. Forget the geographic location, but the expectation and the pressure to perform must have been absolutely enormous.
Yeah, and I got in trouble with, one time I got interviewed and I said, it's been a real tough, and I use the word reverse culture shock, because I grew up in Detroit, I played junior hockey in Montreal, and I played in LA. So now I'm in Edmonton, smaller city, and people took offense to that, saying that I was making fun of the city or whatever, which I really wasn't. It was actually a very nice city, and the people, I still have very good friends from Edmonton that I talk to on a regular basis. Edmonton was a nice city, but it was just so much smaller than I was used to. It was like a small, suburb almost of like a big city. And take that city in mourning, and every conversation is about hockey, and every conversation is about Wayne, and 4 cups in 5 years, and wow, we're in 3rd place. And I was the symbol, because I was the only American on the team, and the main player traded for Wayne. So it was a very difficult situation. The players were great, like I said, some of the greatest players in the history of the NHL, and but Wayne was a friend. They grew up with them. They won cups together. They came in the league together. They were in each other's weddings. And I was a newcomer, and it was tough on all fronts.
Then you had a knee injury there. How did that happen?
Very freak. It was the start of my second year there. We were in Calgary. It was, I think, our last exhibition game. And there was the last shift of the game, or the last minute of the game. And I don't know if you've ever. So anyways, I would put my foot on the bench, and Glenn Anderson, an all-time great, he had his foot on the bench. So imagine 2 feet on the bench, and I'm ready to jump over, but we're both looking at our guy. We don't really know each other's foot is there. We're just kind of being lazy and putting our foot there, waiting for our guy to come and then jumping over. And there's a minute to go, last exhibition game. Well, we just happened to both jump at the exact same time. And as we're doing that, our feet got tangled, and my knee kind of came underneath. So I'm coming with a leg underneath from the top of the boards, and I land right on my leg like this. And I tore my PCL, posterior cruciate ligament, which is very common in car accidents when your knee is bent and you get slammed, and very common for NFL linemen. The ACL is the more common one. Everyone knows what an ACL is. The basketball player or the soccer player that gets extended. Well, the PCL is this way, or an NFL lineman. So that was the injury. And I just remember thinking, are you kidding me? A minute to go in this useless exhibition game, and you get a pretty, serious injury. I was out for about a month or so, but that was kind of the time when I got traded to the Red Wings.
Right. So
I asked for the trade.
Right. You asked for the trade 4 games into the second season, and now here you are traded to your hometown, my hometown, Detroit Red Wings. By the way, I was super psyched when I heard about the trade. You're traded with another player and a 5th round pick for Adam Graves, Peter Klima, and Joe Murphy, who had been the number 1 pick. The Wings had selected in front of you in the draft, and as fate would happen, these players then helped Edmonton win the Stanley Cup the final season, their 5th in 7 years. At this point, did you care? You're home and you're with your family and you're with the team I assume you always wanted to play for?
I loved playing for the Red Wings. It was great. And we, it was totally different. So now here you are, very well known now in the city, big hockey town, and a lot of friends and family at every game. And now the Red Wings are an up and coming team. Like we were like winning President's trophies for the most points in the regular season, but then we would not do so well in the playoffs. And then, of course, a few years later, that's when the Red Wing dynasty kind of emerged. But this was kind of the building blocks of that. I was there when Sergei Fedorov got there. Obviously, Steve Yzerman was the linchpin. Nick Lidstrom, I assisted on his first NHL goal. So literally, I saw these guys come in like major players. I mean, the trade happened and the Oilers win the cup. Was I upset? No. Would I have loved to have been there and win a cup? Absolutely. But sports is sport. So you move on. Like, what can you do?
So you have good years in Detroit, and then Bruce was right. You come back to LA, you're traded for another future Hall of Famer, Paul Coffey. And here you are now. The irony of this is you're playing with Wayne Gretzky in LA.
Yeah, so I had some decent years in Detroit. I was scoring, 30 goals or so, and I had some injuries there, but it was a totally different scenario. You have Yzerman, you have Fedorov, you had me. I wasn't getting nearly the ice time I got, but that I was used to in other, like especially in my early years with the Kings. But it was a tremendous. I really enjoyed my time with the Red Wings, and you could see that team was starting to build up, and then. Of course, they created, years later, they created a nice little Red Wing dynasty. But yeah, so I get a call. So I become, I don't know if friends is the right word, but I became, pretty close to Mike Ilitch, the owner of the Red Wings. And a quick little side story from Mr. Ilitch. He told me many years later, he'd bought the Detroit Tigers as well. He told me, "Hey, I want to tell you something." I said, "What's that, Mr. I?" Everyone called him Mr. I. And you want to talk about how Bruce was beloved by his players? So was Mr. Ilitch. He was, beloved. All the players loved him. He was very good to his players. So he told me, he says, now you got to understand, he grew up in Detroit, and he is Macedonian, which is very close to Greece, Macedonian Greek, and we're both Orthodox. I'm a Greek Orthodox. He's Macedonian Orthodox. He came to me one day. He goes, I learned many years later that we share the same birthday. And I'm like, we do? He goes, July 20th. He goes, of course, you're a lot younger than me. He goes, if I had opened that program at that draft table and I had seen that we shared the same birthday, and that you were a local hometown kid and you were an Orthodox. That's what he told me. He goes, I would have overruled my scouts and picked you right on the spot. So I thought that was a funny anecdote from an NHL owner. But yeah, he was a tremendous owner. But he pulls me in one day. I remember he's kind of like the Bruce calling me in the middle of July to tell me that you may get traded. So Mr. Ilitch calls me up. He goes, hey, can you meet me down at Tiger Stadium? Now, he had just bought the Tigers. He owns the Red Wings and the Tigers. I'm like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And he pulls me in, and we go to his suite at Old Tiger Stadium, and we're in there, and we were chit-chatting, and he just kind of asked me, he says to me, would you want to be traded? I'm like, no, I love playing here in Detroit. He goes, well, you're not getting as much ice as you're used to. But he says, but I got to tell you, Bruce is just lighting me up every month. He's like, keeps asking me, hey, if you ever want to trade Carson, I'm here, whatever. And I had not really thought about it because it's like 3-4 years after Bruce had said, I'm going to try to get you back. So I said, I really don't want to be traded, but if I had to be traded, I said LA would be fine. And he said, you sure about that? I said, yeah. I said, that, he says, I'll be going somewhere where I think I'd be wanted. And 3-4 months later, he calls me up. Mr. Ilitch calls me up and says, okay, we're trading you. He says, to LA. Remember our conversation this summer? And I'm like, yeah. He says, okay. He says, that's just a trade that I think will work out good for both sides. And so now I go back to LA. And if you remember, that was the first real run the Kings had. We went to the Stanley Cup Finals and we lost to Montreal. And the city just exploded in intensity and in Kings mania and hockey mania, Stanley Cup mania. It was insane in a good way. And it was like, so we were all looking at each other thinking, wow, what LA is a hockey town.
You were a huge part of that too. I mean, in the first round, you had 5 goals in 6 games against the Flames.
Yeah, that was exciting. I mean, so when I got there, Wayne was hurt. He had some back injuries, and there were some rumors that it may be more severe or serious, but it turned out not to be. I mean, I think it was pretty serious at the time, but he came back and early on, I had some success early in the series, in the playoffs, and then the famous against Toronto when Wayne scored that amazing goal in Game 7 in Toronto, and it was just kind of a fairy tale run. And then we got to Montreal. We won the first game, and then we lost the next 3 games in overtime. And then we won the first one. We lost 3 in overtime. Then we lost the last one in Montreal. And to this day, that's the last cup that's been won in Canada. Because the Canadians always complain, we haven't won a cup in Canada in forever. And that was it. It was 1993.
So you played for the Kings a few years, and then you finished your career. You went to Vancouver, you went to the Hartford Whalers, and then you finished with the Detroit Vipers. We talked about the moment you first put on your skates, you're driving to the game, you're nervous, you step out on the ice. What was the last game like? Did you know you were playing your last game? And what was it like when you took off the skates and took off the uniform?
As an athlete, it's a mixed emotion because so you're playing in the NHL for a number of years and you've had some success, and then some injuries come, and you've got to realize, you get to a certain age, you realize that every new draft pick and every young kid at training camp is there for one reason: to take your job. And you get to that certain stage where you're like, okay, I think I still can be one of the top players, but there's a lot of people nipping at your heels. So once I went from the Kings, and then Vancouver, I was there for a brief spat, and then Hartford, which ended up being the Carolina Hurricanes, which is kind of a roundabout for me, was Peter Karmanos, the owner that I told you about in my amateur days. I played for 3 very unique owners that I knew personally, and Bruce McNall, Mike Ilitch, and Peter Karmanos. And but I knew at that point, after Hartford, I went and played in Europe, in Lausanne, Switzerland, which was a tremendous experience. And you knew like your NHL career was on empty. And the question was, some people they're willing to go to the minors, and they're willing to, try to bounce back and hang on. And I went so in Detroit at the time, the Vipers were an IHL team. They were getting a lot of people kind of the tail end of their career. So for me, that was just a lot of fun. And we played good, intense hockey, and we actually won a championship in the IHL. And it's where the Pistons played, and they just recently knocked the stadium down, which was amazing, because the stadium still looked like it was brand new. But they moved to Little Caesars Arena downtown. But so we were getting 10,000 fans a game. You almost felt like it was a mini NHL team. But you weren't playing with the at least I wasn't, with the hope of, okay, if I play well, I'm going to get back to the NHL. It truly was playing for fun, enjoying yourself, getting an extra couple of years of competitive hockey, and using it as a bridge to get to your next, at least for me, to the next kind of career.
So let's talk about your next career. When I got to know Bruce and I got to know you, it was clear one thing: you're highly educated, very motivated, very thoughtful, plan for your future. Bruce told me you get to the Kings and you're sitting in the forum room and guys maybe in the forum club and guys may be drinking. They're going out late every night. You didn't drink. You read the Wall Street Journal in the forum club and in the locker room. So you were really, and part of it I assume was the family upbringing as well. A lot of professional athletes go bankrupt shortly after they're done playing. We all know the statistics. We've heard about them. When did all of that start? I read somewhere that you earned a certification to be a financial rep, I think 6 years before you were done playing. Talk to me about planning for the future, knowing you wanted to have a second career and being ready for it when it actually happened.
So, you know, a lot of people have always said, oh, yeah, he always read the Wall Street Journal, which is true. I love learning about markets and business, et cetera. But I was also reading the hockey news. That's what I would say. Yeah. So this was like an add-on to me. I was intensely involved in hockey, like following all the stuff. But I knew, and my dad kind of told me, like, listen, this is gonna end. It doesn't matter if you're Gordie Howe or Wayne Gretzky or Sidney Crosby or Luc Robitaille. Your career is going to end, and it could be a 1-year career, a 10-year career, or a 20-year career. At some point, that's going to end. And what are you going to do? What do you want to do? So, and it's not just a money issue. I know a lot of former players who have done well financially and they've maintained, you know, certain standard of living, but they feel like they're not really contributing to society or you know, a contributing citizen, whatever they're feeling. They feel like, okay, what am I going to do today? What's my purpose? So I thought it was important to start planning a little bit while I was playing in the off season. So I really liked financial markets. I really liked learning about business. I like in entrepreneurship, et cetera. So I just started getting various licenses in the off season, which evolved to a Series 7. And, you know, in the insurance world and estate planning and in the investment world and in securities world. And I just started kind of knocking those out in the summertime. And then I actually started kind of doing a tailor-made internship with some financial companies in the off season, just to kind of learn the ropes. Because I knew someday when I was done that I thought that would be a good route for me. You're interfacing with people. Some of the experiences you may be discussing are experiences you've been through as being an athlete. People were coming to you saying you should do this, you should invest, you should whatever. And I just went down that path, and you know, it's 25 years later. I've been, you know, it's been an excellent run and very fulfilling, and been successful at it. And I love helping people and love being involved. It's kind of the one thing about pro sports you miss is the camaraderie of being in the locker room and being part of something. Here, you're still part of something, but you're helping families and you're helping some entrepreneurs that fulfill certain financial goals, and you're part of their team in some respects. So yeah, it's been a great ride, and I enjoy it. And the thing that it's given me is the flexibility to control my time, so that when my kids were growing up and had sporting events and other activities, I attended 97% of them, 98% of them, because I could control my schedule. And to me, that was the most important while still making a living.
Is it safe to say you've made a lot more money post hockey than during hockey?
Yes.
I'm sure that's an understatement. And I think it's a great lesson for people that have what essentially is a short self-life as a career. I have advised numerous professional athletes, football players in particular, a couple of young ones recently who have signed huge contracts. And athletes today are getting smarter about their future. They're saving more. I think the leagues today have financial advisors that they set you up with coming into the league. And I think it's a different thing today than it was back then.
A lot different. Back then, you got nothing. You were on your own. The contracts obviously were not nearly as big, but even then, the contracts we were signing, I remember the players that played in the 70s or 80s, they thought they were exorbitant. What people were making in the 80s and 90s, and of course, players in the 80s and 90s are looking at what's being getting paid now, and thinking, "Oh my gosh, that's incredible." So, but you were pretty much on your own back then. I'm not totally versed on what's going on now, but I think you're right. It's a lot more. You have a lot better chance of being able to be introduced to someone who can help you.
Let's talk about money for a second. What was your first contract? How much was it? Sort of funny because your dad, maybe one of the few players who maybe made more money than you. It's sort of like Bill Lambier, who played for the Pistons. You remember him.
Yeah.
And the joke was in the league, he was the only player whose dad made more than he did. But let's talk about your first contract. What did you make and what did you do? Did you splurge or buy yourself something special?
No, on the splurge. That I can tell you right off the bat is I to be honest, I'm trying to remember. I think it was like $100,000 signing bonus and like $125,000 or $150,000 salary with a bunch of bonuses built in. But I'm not totally I think that's accurate. That sounds like pretty ballparkish.
You mentioned a few mentors before in your career. I love mentoring people. I have a large summer intern program. We have 36 interns each summer. They learn from me. I spend a lot of time with them. I have guest speakers every week. I know we try to get you in there at the end of the year, but you were on your way to Greece. But it's very important for all of us, I think, to have mentors who we look up to. Who were some of yours and how did they influence your life and your career?
Well, I had a lot of mentors, family members and non-family members. One I remember looking at my 4'10" grandma from Greece, who literally in Greek, Yaya's grandma, she would sit and tell me stories of what it was like for the Nazis and Germans to come in. And I'm thinking, here's this lady with 7 kids as a widow. And literally she's telling me stories of her 3 sons. The two sons were similar in age. That they had one pair of shoes and they had to switch off days that they were wearing shoes, and that she would say that there would only be enough food for the family, and she may get a bite or two of bread, but she said that was okay because the kids. And you would hear and she would say these stories so nondescriptly, like that was just kind of a normal thing, and you could see the pain in her eyes of remembering some of those. And I was one of those. I was just I actually learned how to speak Greek because of that. She didn't speak English, so I would quiz her. So that was a role model to me to think, wow, the any problems that we think we might have, like a deal didn't go well, or you get traded, or you didn't score, or you got benched, or whatever it is. You just think is that really even in the same ballpark of what someone like that went through? I had a couple teachers. We mentioned Real Turcotte, coaches earlier on. He was a mentor. Of course, I'd say my dad was a huge mentor. And I had some friends as I got older that I met through hockey, but they weren't they didn't. Yeah, they met me because of hockey, but we remained friends not because of hockey. We remained friends because of we really enjoyed each other's company, and I viewed them as a mentor, and they were a little bit older, and they were giving me really sound advice. One of them is in Edmonton to this day. He calls me every day, my birthday. The joke is he's always the first call. He never forgets, and we have nice chats about life and things that are going well or not so well, and it's a bigger picture conversation instead of, how's this deal going, or where are you going on vacation, or whatever.
People listening to this podcast, one of the reasons I think that people listen to podcasts and my podcast is they want to be motivated for their future. They want to know what made people successful. So I want to ask you, what are the 3 to 5 most important ingredients of success in your view?
Well, that's an interesting question, and one I've actually thought about over the years. I think that question can be answered a lot of different ways, but I'll answer it for myself. I'm a person of great faith, so I know some people aren't, and I don't look down at those people. But for me, faith is very important, to know that you're part of something bigger, that it's not just your world and your success that is what everything revolves around. So in the way I was raised and the way I believe that our purpose on life, in this life, is for something bigger. So to try to do good things, help other people, and, as you said earlier, be there for someone who may be down, and to try to be as successful as you can, not only for the joys of success, but also to try to be better in this world, or helping, be it charities or institutions you believe in, or other people. So faith with that bigger picture. Then I believe second for me would be family. So you got your faith, you got your family. What does that mean? Well, we all have families, but for me to want to be successful, I'm doing it because there's people I love, and there's people that are counting on me, and that I'm trying to do the best I can to. And it's not just a money thing. It's not just trying to be able to buy them a car or send them to a good school. Is to show a good work ethic, to show what being a good citizen is. And when you mess up, fess up, fess up, and try to be better. No one's perfect. And then that dovetails into work ethic. So faith, family, work ethic. And I don't care what it is. If you want to be a yoga teacher, or if you want to be an investment banker, or you want to be an actor, or you want to be a pro athlete, it all requires work ethic. And you have to go that extra mile to be prepared, to be knowledgeable, to expand your knowledge, keep your knowledge, put in the grunt work. Just because you achieve a certain level doesn't mean you're some superstar and you can't do the things that got you there anymore. So that's the way I kind of view work ethic. And then I think there's a sense of just being thankful for what you've accomplished and where you're at, and not be jealous if someone has more than you, or someone's supposedly doing better or whatever. Be happy for them. Back to my 4'10" grandma from Greece who escaped with 7 kids during the World War II. She used to tell me, the more you give with your heart without an agenda, the more you'll receive. And it doesn't mean you're going to receive a big deal or money or whatever, but you're going to receive blessings. You're going to receive good wishes. You're just going to have a good sense of being about yourself, that if you're helping people to the best of your ability, and it may not even be something huge. It may be like someone's not doing well. Just pick up the phone and encourage them. Say hi to them. Talk to them. And then sometimes there are bigger things. So I don't know. I don't know if that answered your question, but I tried to. Those are kind of the tenets in my life that I tried to live by, and go from there.
Regardless of age, if someone comes to you and said, Jimmy, what's the best piece of advice you could give me to further my career? And it only had to be one. And I'm talking about, there's young people listening and watching today. There's older people like us listening and watching today, and even people a few years beyond us. What's the one piece of advice you would give to those wanting to better themselves?
I would say network and learn. Network, if you can get yourself involved with other people within your industry or outside and learn from them, meaning everyone has gone through ups and downs and everyone has gotten to where they've gotten on their own path, but everyone has certain universal truths for the most part. Like I said earlier, work ethic, learn from your mistakes, try not to duplicate your mistakes, humility, be humble, etc. I think would be, and I don't know, I just visualize that as network and learn.
All right. In closing, we've covered a lot here. Before we end, I want to ask if there's anything you want to share with us that we haven't talked about. And of course, I want you to give yourself a plug.
So Randy, I just want to say, I know, because you're too humble to admit that or to discuss it, is that you've made a big difference in a lot of people's lives through what you've done with some of your charitable endeavors. And I think especially your mentorship programs. I know a little bit about what you've been doing with young college kids and trying to help them on their paths. And you have a lot of life experiences that you've lived, and you're very meticulous about the way you like to do things. And I know the people you've helped through the Justice Ball and I know your internship program and et cetera. So I appreciate our friendship, appreciate the time to be on this podcast. I wish you a lot of success, and I'm sure I'll be a regular listener with your other guests. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
It's been great having you. I appreciate the generosity of your time. Thank you. Until next time.